Billionaire CEO tried to humiliate Black Waitress in Arabic. Seconds later, she shocked him with her reply. In the glittering atmosphere of a five-star restaurant where chandeliers sparkled and hushed conversations of powerful guests filled the air, a billionaire CEO sat at the center of attention. He was a man known not only for his wealth but also for the arrogance that followed him everywhere he went. With each movement, he radiated superiority, as though the world and everyone in it existed solely for his benefit. When a young black waitress approached his table with a warm and professional smile, he didn't see her humanity. Instead, he saw only an opportunity to belittle someone he considered beneath him. Leaning back in his chair, he turned toward his associate and muttered something in Arabic, his lips curling with a cruel smirk. The words were not meant to be kind. They dripped with insults about her job, her appearance, and her very presence in the room. His associate stifled a laugh, fueling the billionaire's arrogance further, convinced no one around them could understand. The waitress, however, understood every word, though her face remained composed and her movements graceful. She set the glass of water before him without reaction, her silence sharper than any response. The billionaire, certain he had succeeded in humiliating her, sat back satisfied, unaware that the very foundation of his pride was about to be shaken. As the evening unfolded, his behavior only grew more brazen. Each time the waitress passed by, he took another jab in Arabic, layering his comments with ridicule while displaying his dominance to those around him. He laughed louder than necessary, ensuring that his performance drew attention from the surrounding tables. Some guests glanced uneasily in his direction, their expressions betraying discomfort, but none dared to confront a man of such influence. The waitress, however, carried herself with unwavering composure. Behind her calm exterior, she held a quiet confidence and a strength he could not begin to measure. She had endured far greater challenges in life than the taunts of a man intoxicated by his own wealth. Finally, after yet another degrading remark, she paused beside his table and straightened her posture. Her demeanor shifted. No longer that of a silent server, but of someone ready to command the attention of every soul in the room. The atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation, as though the very walls were waiting to hear what she would say. Then, in flawless Arabic, she spoke. Her voice was steady, her tone sharp, and her words carried across the room with crystal clarity. She repeated his insults word for word, exposing his cruelty for everyone to hear, before delivering her own message. With eloquence and precision, she told him that true greatness was never measured by wealth or power, but by how one treated those who served. The billionaire froze, his smug smile dissolving as his pale face revealed shock and embarrassment. His associate looked down at his plate, avoiding eye contact while the entire restaurant erupted into whispers. For the first time, the billionaire found himself stripped of control, silenced in the very language he thought would shield him. A moment later, the room erupted in applause, not for him, but for the woman who had stood her ground with grace and brilliance. In that instant, she reminded everyone present that dignity and respect would always outweigh arrogance and gold. As the evening progressed, the billionaire's arrogance seemed to grow bolder with every passing moment. Each time the waitress walked by his table, he made sly comments in Arabic, certain that his words were hidden behind a language barrier that no one in the room could break. His insults were cruel and cutting, mocking her intelligence, her appearance, and even her worth as a human being. Every jab he delivered was meant to entertain his companion and assert his dominance, as though humiliating another person gave him power. His laughter echoed louder than the quiet music of the restaurant, drawing uneasy glances from nearby guests who sensed the tension building but chose to remain silent. The waitress, however, refused to let her composure falter. Her movements remained calm and deliberate, her face carrying the same polite professionalism that had greeted him at the start. Yet, behind her steady eyes was a strength he could not see, a quiet resilience born from years of struggle and hard work. She had faced storms far stronger than the shallow cruelty of a wealthy man, and with every insult he threw, her resolve only hardened. He mistook her silence for weakness, for submission, never realizing that she was biding her time. He leaned back arrogantly in his chair, mocking her with another biting remark, laughing as if the entire restaurant existed only to witness his cruelty. His companion chuckled half-heartedly, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to oppose a man of such influence. The waitress stopped beside the table once more, her tray balanced effortlessly in her hands, and for a brief moment she simply stood there, her posture shifting ever so slightly. Gone was the quiet, unnoticed presence of a server blending into the background. In her stance now was authority, power, and the certainty of someone who had found the perfect moment to speak. The air in the restaurant thickened, the conversations at nearby tables softening into silence as though everyone could feel something about to happen. The billionaire smirked, convinced that his game of insults had left her powerless, but the room held its breath as she opened her mouth to respond. "What?" came out silenced, even the clinking of glasses. In flawless Arabic, her voice rang clear, strong, and sharp enough to cut through his arrogance. She repeated his own words back to him, each insult laid bare for everyone to hear, and the smirk slid off his face instantly. His confidence crumbled, as he realized his private cruelty had been exposed in front of an audience that now understood the truth. But she did not stop there. She looked directly at him, her voice steady, and told him in his own language that true greatness was never measured by how much wealth a man possessed, but by the way he treated others, especially those who worked to serve. The guests watched in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on her, as she dismantled the image of the billionaire piece by piece. His face grew pale, his hands twitched nervously on the table, and for the first time, the man who once commanded. Every room he entered was left speechless. The restaurant had turned into a stage, and the waitress, with her courage and brilliance, had claimed the spotlight. Her words hung in the air like thunder, and the entire dining hall seemed to freeze in the moment, every eye fixed on the scene that was unfolding before them. The billionaire, who had walked into the restaurant expecting admiration and submission, now sat trapped in a silence that felt heavier than any applause. His pale face betrayed the shock he tried desperately to conceal, but there was no escaping it. He had been exposed in his own language, stripped of the shield he believed made him untouchable. The waitress stood tall, her voice unwavering as she continued, each word deliberate and powerful, cutting through his arrogance like a blade. She reminded him that the greatest form of strength was not in how much wealth one possessed, nor in how loudly one commanded a room, but in the respect shown to others, especially those who gave their time and labor so that people like him could enjoy their comfort. The whispers spread quickly, rippling across tables like waves, until the billionaire's humiliation was no longer his secret, but a story the entire room shared. His associate, red-faced and restless, stared down at his plate, refusing to acknowledge the collapse of the man he had laughed with only minutes ago. Guests who had once admired the billionaire's influence now looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and disgust, their admiration evaporating into the air. The silence that had followed her words shifted into something different. An energy that carried with it a sense of justice, a satisfaction that arrogance had finally met its match. The billionaire opened his mouth as if to reply, but no words came. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, betrayed him completely, leaving him exposed in front of the very people he had sought to impress. The waitress did not linger on his weakness. She did not gloat or raise her tone. Instead, she bowed her head politely, as though nothing extraordinary had taken place, and returned to her duties with the same calm grace she had displayed all evening. That quiet dignity spoke louder than any insult she could have hurled, for it showed that she needed no anger to prove her worth. The clatter of a fork hitting the floor broke the silence, and then, unexpectedly, a single pair of hands began to clap. It was hesitant at first, but soon others joined in, the sound building and echoing through the hall until it filled every corner of the restaurant. The applause was not just for her linguistic brilliance, but for her courage, her composure, and her strength in standing tall against the cruelty of power. The billionaire slumped in his chair, his shoulders hunched, his presence diminished in a way no financial loss could ever achieve. For the first time, he tasted what it felt like to be small in a world where he had always believed himself to be untouchable. The waitress, now the true center of the evening, carried on as though nothing had changed, though everyone in that room knew they had witnessed something unforgettable, a lesson in humility delivered in the most powerful way imaginable. The applause rolled through the restaurant like a wave, rising and falling until it became impossible to ignore. People who had remained silent during the billionaire's cruel performance now found themselves on their feet, their hands striking, together in support of the woman who had held her dignity like a shield. The billionaire shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his once confident smile gone, his power dissolving with every clap that echoed around him. He had entered the room expecting reverence, but now he was the subject of ridicule, a man stripped of the illusion that wealth alone could command respect. The waitress, however, did not revel in the humiliation she had caused him. Instead, she gave a soft, polite bow, her face calm, her demeanor professional, as though all she had done was carry out her duties. Her restraint only made the moment more powerful, for while he had relied on arrogance and cruelty to assert himself, she had needed nothing more than composure and truth. Guests whispered among themselves, some in disbelief, others in admiration, knowing they had just witnessed a moment that would be spoken of long after the plates were cleared. As the clapping slowly subsided, the energy in the room shifted. The atmosphere that had once been thick with discomfort now hummed with a sense of justice, as though balance had been restored. The billionaire lowered his head, unable to meet the eyes of anyone around him, and for the first time he felt what it was like to be powerless in a world that no longer looked at him with awe, but with contempt. His associate, embarrassed and ashamed, excused himself quietly, leaving the billionaire to sit in his own silence. The waitress resumed her duties with grace, pouring water, carrying plates, and offering the same service she had given before, but now every guest who received it looked at her differently. She was no longer just a waitress in their eyes, but a reminder of strength, intelligence, and courage hidden in plain sight. By the time the night drew to a close, the story of what had happened was already spreading beyond the walls of the restaurant. Guests who had been present retold the moment with excitement, some emphasizing the billionaire's shock, others repeating the waitress's flawless command of Arabic. With each retelling, the lesson grew clearer. Arrogance can fill a room for a moment, but respect and wisdom echo far longer. The billionaire left quietly, his once booming presence diminished, a man who had been taught in the harshest way that money could not buy the admiration he craved. The waitress, however, finished her shift as she always did, collecting her things and walking home beneath the streetlights, carrying herself with the same grace she had shown all night. She did not need applause or recognition, for she knew her worth had never depended on the approval of others. But for those who had witnessed the exchange, the memory lingered. They had seen wealth crumble before dignity, cruelty defeated by intelligence, and arrogance silenced by truth. It was a story they would remember, one that would remind them for years to come that no amount of power or riches could overshadow the strength of a person who refused to be diminished.